can't believe it's taken me this long to make this tutorial, but here it is. It's how to make my simple chocolate cake. Now, it's not the most incredible chocolate cake in the world, you know, one of those like really rich, dense, chocolatey ones, but it is light, it's got the chocolate flavor, and it pairs beautifully with chocolate ganache or a Swiss meringue buttercream flavored with chocolate as well. So I love making this for my cakes. I find that a lot of richer chocolate cakes are actually too wet and too dense to make a big layered cake. So this is the cake that I make for birthdays and weddings. It's lighter, it's fresher, and again, it's really easy to make. So it's really similar to my simple sponge recipe. In fact, it's pretty much the same, but we're going to add the chocolate, obviously. So like my normal sponge, I have some melted butter on the stove behind me, and in the meantime I'm going to prepare my cake tins. Now this is for a 6-inch recipe, and people ask me how to multiply it for larger tins. It's a really easy recipe to multiply. So this, I would always say, is my batch 1 for 6-inch tins. So I divide it into 2. If you want it for 8-inch, double it, 10-inch, triple it, etc. So I've got my 2 tins here, and I'm going to line them properly. So they've already been greased with butter, got some paper, and I'm going to line them using my trick. So fold it again, and again and again. Make 2 circles. And then I've got strips of parchment that I'm going to put around the cake tin. So, easy as that. Cake tins are lined. I always stress how important it is to line your cake tins properly, because the last thing you want is that sponge getting stuck to the tin. So I'm going to grab my melted butter and then get on with the sponge. So like my normal sponge cake recipe, I'm using unsalted butter, and I've melted it on a really low heat because you don't want it to boil, otherwise it starts to separate. So this is just plain melted butter here, and I'm going to go in with my caster sugar straight in the pan, and I'm also going to add in a little bit of my vanilla powder, which is ground up vanilla pod. I've got a whole tutorial about it, and I'm going to whisk the sugar, vanilla and butter together. So you can obviously do this in a mixer. You don't have to use a whisk. We're not incorporating air. I just find it quicker and easier to do it with a whisk when you're doing it by hand. And you know me, I like saving on washing up. So this is why I always make the 6-inch in a saucepan, because you literally don't need to use the mixer for it. So it doesn't take long at all. And once the sugar's mixed in, it kind of makes this thick paste. And now it's time to add the eggs, and before I add them, I like to just break them up a bit because it makes it easier to mix them into the rest of the ingredients. And in they go. And mix the eggs through. Now I find if you add the eggs when you're doing the creaming method, the mixture curdles. This doesn't curdle, which is why I love this method even more than the other one. So the eggs are completely mixed in, and now I'm going to sieve in my cocoa powder and self-raising flour. Now I usually don't bother sifting because flour's fine enough and you're not looking for anything that foreign in the flour, but it's the cocoa powder that is usually quite lumpy, and I also want the cocoa powder and the flour to mix in really evenly, otherwise you get speckles of white flour in the cake. So in goes the cocoa powder and then the flour. And sieve that in. Trying not to make a mess. And there's always lumps of cocoa which I just push through with my hands. And I will use the whisk again to mix the flour and cocoa powder in, but again, I'm not incorporating air, I'm not creating volume, it's just to mix it in. And once all the flour's in, I'm just going to tap the excess off the whisk, and I'm going to give it a good mix around using a spatula, just to make sure that all the flour or leftover butter is off the base of the pan. And you can see what a beautifully smooth batter you get. So, same as always, I like to measure the cake batter into the tin so I get an even amount. I'm going for about 470 grams. You might be off 5 grams. I don't think 5 grams matters that much. So the batter is evenly in the tins, and I'm going to cook them at 175 degrees for 40 to 45 minutes. And I always check after 35 minutes and give them a rotation. You may have noticed that I've reduced my temperature to 175. I think it's my oven, but I just think 180 is making the cake's dome slightly too much, and I've noticed just reducing it 5 degrees, so that's degrees Celsius, they don't dome as much and kind of don't crack as much at the top. So I'm going to be cooking these, checking them after 35 minutes to make sure that they're cooked all the way through. So the chocolate sponges have cooked, and I took them out the tins a couple of minutes after they came out the oven. I find that if you leave them in the tins for a bit longer, then they start to overcook the cakes. So I like getting them out as soon as possible. They smell delicious, and I can really smell the chocolate, even though I've only used cocoa powder. Which brings me to the point that I forgot to mention earlier. Just make sure that you use a really good quality cocoa powder. I've listed my ingredients in the comments below, so feel free to check them out. But essentially, that's the flavor you're tasting. So the better quality cocoa powder, the better tasting the cake. It's simple. So what I'm gonna do is I leave them to cool completely and then wrap them in cling film and then decorate the cake the next day. Firstly, it ensures that they are completely cold before you decorate, because you don't want warm cakes and then trying to deal with buttercream. Total mess. And also, the crumb is less. I don't know why, but cakes the next day just don't produce as much crumbs. So there we go, I told you it was simple. These sponges work really well with chocolate flavored buttercreams, whether it's a Swiss meringue or American frosting, or even a richer one such as a chocolate ganache. So try it out. Remember, it's really easy to multiply as well, so just double it if you're going for 8 inches, triple it if you're going for 10. Really simple recipe. It will also work great for cupcakes too. If you do try it out, please remember to tag me at George's Cakes, because I love seeing what you make. And any suggestions for any other videos, then write in the comments below. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.